Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 24th, 2003 meeting of the Haltom City Council. To those of you who are here in the council chamber, we welcome you, and to those of you who are watching on HCTV, we are pleased to have you join us tonight as the council deliberates the business of the city as indicated on the agenda that's posted for tonight. I'd like to ask you at this time, if you would, to stand for the invocation and pledge to be led by Councilmember Bob Hurley.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many blessings. We thank you for this day and for those present here tonight. Father, we pray that you will give our president and military leaders wisdom and judgment in their decisions and actions involving our troops in Iraq, and that you would watch over and protect our military forces. Father, guide and direct this council in all their decisions for the greater good of Haltom City. We ask in all this in your name. Amen.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It is my pleasure tonight to make a proclamation, and I'll go to the speaker stand for that and introduce it, and then make this presentation. I think all of us are aware that we're in day 5 of the war with Iraq. And we've all been watching and praying for the troops who are involved in that. And this is a particularly difficult time for our nation. And I wanted tonight to make a proclamation in recognition of our support for our troops. It's my pleasure to make this proclamation and present it to Mr. Ormsby. If you will join me here at the lectern at this time. The reason I'd selected Mr. Ormsby to be the one to present this to, he is a veteran. After 21 years of service to this country, he retired, and he's extremely active in veterans affairs with not only the American Legion but the VFW and other organizations. And everywhere I go, I run into this gentleman if it has anything to do with the military and with anything that has to do with veterans' rights. And he lives here in Haltom City, and I could think of no one better to make this presentation to tonight. So, Mr. Ormsby, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to read this from the office of the mayor, City of Haltom City, Texas. I make this presentation as the mayor on behalf of the city council and our citizens here tonight. Whereas our world changed after the tragedy of September the 11th, 2001, and whereas rogue regimes that attempt to acquire weapons of mass destruction and sponsor terrorism must be confronted, and whereas in his address to the nation on Monday the 17th of March 2003, President Bush declared, "We cannot live under the threat of blackmail," and demanded that Saddam Hussein and his 2 sons flee Iraq within 48 hours or face a U.S.-led military invasion. And whereas on Tuesday, March the 18th, 2003, Saddam Hussein rejected President Bush's demand to flee in exile, and whereas war erupted on Wednesday evening, March 19th, 2003, when the United States launched Tomahawk cruise missiles at selected targets of military importance to destroy the Iraqi leadership without risking civilian death and destruction, and whereas our freedom and prosperity is directly interwoven with the welfare and development of the rest of mankind, and our future is made more secure when we share in the responsibility of shaping human progress. Now I, therefore, Calvin White, Mayor of the City of Haltom City, Texas, and on behalf of the City Council and our citizens, wish to express our support and our gratitude to President Bush, our Commander-in-Chief, and to the American troops who are placing themselves in harm's way to liberate the Iraqi people and rid the world of the threat of Saddam Hussein and his reign of terror. Mr. Ormsby, it's my privilege to present this to you on behalf of all veterans and all current troops that we have fighting for our cause in Iraq.
Thank you.
Would you like to address the citizens, if you would?
I'll accept this on behalf of all the veterans in Haltom City and wherever. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ormsby.
Thank you.
We
Appreciate
appreciate what you did for the country and what all of our veterans have done. Members of the council, any of you like to make any comment regarding the matter that has just been completed? Okay, we move on then to a presentation by the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think the chairperson of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Mr. Bill Lanford, here is tonight, and he's going to give us a briefing on the duties and the purpose of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Mr. Lanford, if you would introduce yourself, give us your name and address for the benefit of the people here and those who are watching on HCTV.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, gentlemen of the council. My name is Bill Lanford. I live at 2901 Haltom Road here in Haltom City. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission since 1996, I believe it is. And I would like to first tell you, give you the names of the other members of this fine commission, because they work very hard. Sonny Elliott, Kathy Thompson, who is our secretary, Bill Dunn, Scott Allen, who's newly elected as vice chairman, Eugene Bernard, William Nickel, who is new to the commission, and the alternates are Susan Hernandez and Juanita Adam, all citizens of Haltom City, and they do a very good job. One of the, as the name would suggest, we have interest in planning matters and zoning matters. Planning, probably the most important thing we do with respect to planning is the comprehensive land use plan. That normally is done about every 5 years. And we just completed that in the past year, had a series of citizen input meetings, and came up with a brand spanking new updated version that basically sets the tone and makes pointed suggestions about where we want, what uses we want for the land that's in Haltom City. And this is not a binding document, but it is. It gives aid and comfort where citizens want to do projects, develop any property that is within the scope of the comprehensive land use plan. It goes much more smoothly, and then those projects which fall outside of the suggested uses of the comprehensive land use plan then face a more difficult path for approval, and that's by design. We also, in the last year, we've revisited the entire zoning ordinance, about this thick, and have completed that task. Again, this commission works pretty hard. We meet twice a month on a regular basis, and then have additional meetings when we have special projects going on. And I think this summer, possibly, James can correct me if I'm wrong, I think this summer we're going to visit the subdivision ordinance, and that's the three main documents that the Planning and Zoning Commission deals with. So we've maintained like I say, a fairly busy schedule, and have one more piece of it, and then I guess we'll just go into overdrive then, and be a little smoother sailing after that. One of the things that I wanted to mention to this council, with new members coming on, we have and will continue to have a need to provide these folks with an opportunity to attend some seminars. The COG puts on a couple a year, and there's some other very fine seminars that become available to us. And I know it's crunch time for the budget. Just don't forget that we've got some folks that really do need to be exposed to some of the things that are taught in these seminars, and that's especially important for the newcomers. And so, just would ask you to keep that in mind. The last thing I wanted to say was I think you've got later on tonight, you've got an issue coming up about sidewalk variances, and I will tell you that our commission has really wrestled with that. Even goes back far as when Trey was on the commission. Had some quite interesting discussions about what to do and why to do it. And I think that is in general terms, it's no secret that we, as a body, we would like to have more sidewalks in Haltom City in particular places. It's also no secret there's a lot of places in Haltom City that does not presently have sidewalks, and so it's hard to find a starting place. And if this body could give us some guidance in that would be very, very helpful. I was just talking to a police officer here in Haltom City not long ago, and telling him about, I've seen kids walking to school up and down a stretch of Haltom Road up north of us here where there are no sidewalks. And these are kiddos that were out on their bicycles riding up and down Haltom Road, with traffic backed up everywhere. And also kids walking. We've got some walking down from those Spring Lakes apartments down to the little elementary school, and then other kids on bicycles, mostly intermediate school or middle school kids going the other way. And that certainly would be a wonderful place to start. And I don't know that we're going to have an opportunity to do that anytime soon, but maybe just a process where we look at the elementary schools and some of the approaches we have there, and let that guide some of our decisions about having sidewalks in Haltom City. I know that the Legend Point up here, that was one of the things we talked about, and that's I'm real proud we got some sidewalks there that come part of the way up there and provide those kiddos with a sidewalk up there to get around Stanley Keller there and not have to get out there on the street. So things like that are, I think, real important, and we look for you guys for some guidance there and appreciate your help. And now then, I think that's concluded my comments. Unless you have some questions of me, and I'd be glad to answer it.
Yes, if you would, Mr. Lanford, remain at the speaker stand. Some of us may have comments, some of us may have questions. We do appreciate the work you have done all through the years on the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we appreciate what the Planning and Zoning Commission does and the way they contribute to the vision for what we want our city to be. I know the purpose we have had for these presentations is to make our citizens aware of the various boards and commissions we have and what they try to do, and you very articulately presented the objectives of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So we do appreciate you being here. Members of the council, any comments? Councilmember Fowler and then Councilmember Williams.
Quick question, Mr. Lanford. If you would you kind of poll the Planning and Zoning Commissioners and ask them, maybe we would set aside a time before our next council meeting or in the next couple of council meetings for y'all to come forth with an idea? I know we'd kicked a lot of different ideas around and maybe narrow it down to 2 or 3 and see if we could help give you some directive that might make it a little easier. That way we're both on the same page at which direction we're going.
I think that'd be very well received, and I'd certainly be glad to do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Mr. Langford, first of all, I'd like to thank you and your board for the hard work y'all do. The city may not know it, but they usually meet the Tuesday after the council meets. And sometimes it's a short meeting, sometimes it goes into hours. And a lot of times you have citizens that aren't really happy with your results of your meetings.
Sometimes.
I think it would be an injustice if we didn't mention Bill Worthington at the time that we're doing this. Bill had just got off the board this past year, and you, what was 17 years?
Quite a while. He was chairman in when I came on in 1996, and I know he had served for quite a lengthy time and just retired in the past year. And you're right, he was a wonderful mentor, a fair chairman, and ran a good tight meeting.
I'd just like to thank y'all for all your work. I know there's a lot of work goes into it, a lot of preparation, and I know you don't get the big check like we do, but we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I neglected to mention I guess the down and dirty work that we do on a daily basis when we meet. There are two primary types of things that we do, and that is to look at the zoning request, that is request for zoning changes, and the other is for plats. We approve plats and send those recommendations on to the city council, of course, which has the authority for actual approval. We are a recommending body in those instances.
Further comments or questions for Mr. Lanford? Thank you, Mr. Lanford. We appreciate you being with us tonight and providing us with this information. We move now to the consent agenda, and if you look at your agenda, that consists of items number 2 through 8. We are pulling item number 3 off for individual action, and on item number 8, we will postpone that until a later council meeting. So I'm now ready to entertain a motion regarding the consent agenda. Councilmember Hurley? And Councilmember Markham? Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as I had described it a moment ago. If you will, register your vote. And that passes by unanimous vote. Since we pulled item number 3 off, that had to do with establishing fees for certain licenses, permits, and other services in Haltom City. This is the second reading of that ordinance. I believe Council Member Williams had expressed in pre-council a desire for us to take individual action on this. Councilmember Williams, would you like to introduce this item and express your concern and interest
Thank
for
you.
us at this time, please?
The person that just came forward is Pat Elfrink. He's our finance director, and he's going to help me a little bit with this. We amended our fee and license and permit ordinance here last council meeting, and after that council meeting, there was a individual wrote a article to the paper and said that we had raised their taxes through these fees. And I was concerned about it, and I asked him pre-council because I had read this through pretty thoroughly, and I didn't find the word tax in there anywhere at all. And so I wanted to make sure that the citizens of Haltom City actually know that what we're doing here and the reason we're doing it. So if, Pat, if you could kind of explain to us where the word tax is in this amendment, and if it's in there, and if this is a tax increase, or what these fees, why we're actually doing these. I think Richard said that most of the cities are bringing these together now, and explain to the citizens why we have these, why most of them don't cover the cost of what we're actually doing, but they offset the cost. So if you could help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
I will do my best, Councilman. What we have here is an ordinance whose primary intention when we started out was to reorganize and better list all of the different permit fees and service charges that we have throughout the city. I think, just a wild guess, there's probably 120 to 150 fees that are listed here. I'll state very clearly up front, there are no taxes here. Taxes are items that are levied on property, personal property. They're death taxes, estate taxes, gasoline taxes, and things of that nature. We have nothing of that sort in this ordinance. These are all permit fees and user charges and service fees. These are all examples where people come to a municipal government to receive something they cannot receive somewhere else through private enterprise. Building permits, inspection charges, recreational facility use, perhaps even records, copies and things of that nature, animal control, animal adoption fees. All of these are based on the supposition that we are trying to collect the cost of providing a service from the individual who is asking for that service. Actually, these are the mechanism that is used by governments to avoid taxes. If we did not collect the cost of providing a service from these individuals who are asking for a building permit or asking to adopt an animal or asking to use one of our recreational facilities, if we did not collect these fees in this manner, then we would have to resort to some other source of revenue to provide those services, and the only other one I could think of would be a tax. This is a mechanism to avoid taxing the general population for something that individuals are asking a government to do.
You mentioned the recreation center. There's going to be a permit or a fee on that, but that's not going to be for a resident. Isn't it going to be for a non-resident, just like for a spa or a weight room or something?
I believe we have fees here in some cases that are for both for residents and for non-residents. And in some cases, and I'm not an expert on the park and rec fees themselves, in some cases the fees for a non-resident is a little bit higher because it recognizes that residents also contribute to the construction and maintenance of our facilities because of the fact they live here and they pay property taxes.
Are we profiting off these fees?
I would say, even though our goal is to recover most or all of the cost associated with providing a service, in the pre-council you heard one of the other department heads mention that, gee, this one particular fee is probably not recovering the cost. It was like, I think, $150, but right up front the advertising cost associated with the action was $110. And then you have your staff time. In some cases, services that are performed by a government deliberately do not recover full cost because then it might inhibit business development, or it might inhibit the use of, say, our teenagers and children from using the recreational facilities that we try and provide them so that they have a healthy outlet for their activities in, say, the summertime or in the evenings, and keeps them off the street and out of trouble. So in an example that I grew up with where I lived was in the summertime the pools were a dime to get in, and I know darn good and well that didn't cover the cost of getting in, but it kept us off the streets, kept us under supervised activities.
How long ago was that?
Oh, about 100 years, thank you. I knew I should have brought that up.
But it was a quarter where I went.
Oh, thank you.
But in other words, this is just a tool that we use to keep from raising taxes.
I think
And pass the
anyone in
cost.
my position would probably agree because, again, you're trying to obtain payment for a service from the individual who is asking for that service.
Okay.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams? Councilmember Hurley had his light on, and I think that was a point of order, and if it's okay, can we go ahead and finish this item?
Yes, please.
And then we'll come back to your point of order. It related to the previous motion, I believe. So don't let me forget that, Councilmember Hurley. Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could, for the long and short of it, not to bypass you, Mr. Elfrink, but
Right ahead.
I'm going to direct these to the city manager. Did we already have these fees and ordinance, or these fees and user fees in place prior to this?
For the most part, every fee that's listed here had already been in place and assessed throughout the city. There's probably a couple of exceptions where new fees were created, and there's probably yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
There are a few exceptions, and specifically, I'm not sure I could give you an example.
Okay, so they were already in place, and the reason that these fees, or that Mr. Elfrink and his department was asked to put these fees into one document was so that it would be user-friendly for our citizens when they came in and needed to know how much it cost to rent the recreation center for a family reunion. It's right here in the document. You open it up, is that not correct?
That is correct.
Okay, or if electrical contractor comes in and is going to do work in Haltom City and he has to pay a fee to do work in Haltom City, which is $75 or whatever, you can flip right to it in the zoning department or the building department. They can go immediately right to that. It's in the same document. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So in other words, this is simply for clarification,
Exactly.
pretty much.
Yes.
All these fees were in place.
Previously, the fees, most of these fees had been incorporated throughout our Code of Ordinances, which is a document about 2.5 inches thick. So it was very cumbersome if someone walked in and you know, we were asked what's a particular fee. Very difficult to get right to it. Very easy to get to this document, and very easy for us to make copies to provide to citizens. And I believe this fee schedule is also going to be on the website.
Yes.
So this is not a new tax at all. A fee is for our attorney, which he explained to us in pre-council, is not a tax, it's a user fee. Is that correct, Mr. Attorney?
That is correct, Councilmember Feller.
Okay. So I hope that we're all clear, because we have an individual that writes to the newspaper and shows in there every single week and will ask our citizens to believe things that aren't true. We're not raising your taxes. All we're doing is simplifying and clarifying our fee system that every individual in our community uses, whether you're a contractor or if you want to go down and use the rec center, you go down and you want to use the ball fields, let's say. I believe it's $10 to rent the lights on the ball field for 2 hours or whatever. That's paid by whether you're a citizen or whether you're an outside resident, one of the two, or non-resident, I'm sorry. So that's the purpose of this, to clarify things. It's nothing new. It's just we have individuals in our community that would like to create half-truths or mistruths and make other citizens believe that we're raising taxes and doing things that aren't the case. So if anyone has a question, I'd like for them to please call myself or the city manager, and hopefully this will clarify it for everyone and make it simpler and a more friendly environment at City Hall, where you can come in and understand quickly what it costs to use different services in our community. Thank you.
Further comments before I call for the motion? Okay, I'm ready for a motion regarding item number 3. Councilmember Fowler.
Mayor, I move that we approve agenda item number 3. I'm sorry. I move that we approve agenda item number 3.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Councilmember Jennings?
That's for a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, there being none, the display shows that passes by unanimous vote. And now, Councilmember Hurley.
Mayor, I need to make a correction. Whenever I made a motion to pass the consent agenda, I should have excluded item number 8, which should be tabled. I stand corrected, and I apologize.
Okay, and I'll ask our attorney to comment on that. The way I introduced that, I indicated that, and then when you made your motion that we approve the consent agenda, I said with the pulling item number 3 off and item number 8 being tabled until a later council meeting. Is
I
that
missed that, but if that was the wording, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Is that sufficient?
With that introduction, Mayor, that would be a sufficient motion to table item number 8.
Okay. Councilmember Hurley, thank you for being on your toes and for wanting to do things right. That's the only way to do things. We move now to the Visitor Citizens Forum. Our city secretary, do you have any?
Yes, I do want to remind everyone, tomorrow night at 5 o'clock in the pre-council chambers, we will be having drawings for place on the ballot. It is at 5 o'clock in the pre-council chambers.
Okay, that was one of the announcements and events. We do not have tonight any Visitor Citizens Forum cards, applications. Okay. That being the case, we move to the announcements and events. Council Member Averitt, I believe you have an announcement.
I do, Mayor. This next Thursday and Friday, March 27th and 28th, the Haltom City Public Library will be closed. They're having some staff training going on over there. Also, there will be no tax help assistance available on those dates. And for the materials that are out on loan, the due dates will be adjusted for those. Again, those dates are March 27th and 28th.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Averett. Councilmember Williams, I believe you have an announcement to make.
I've got 2 or 3. Residents are invited to take advantage of a free landfill day this on Saturday, April the 5th. The C&D landfill operated by ISI will be accepting bulk items, construction materials, brush, and etc. from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. The landfill is located at 4142 Dick Price Road. That's down off 820, going toward the Everman area. What's the name of that? Rendon area. The amount per household is limited to 1 pickup load and no trailers, please. All loads must be tarped for them to be able to take them in there. All right, be sure and be a part of the Texas Trash Off Saturday, April the 5th, with same day. Volunteers will meet at 8:30 at the Kroger parking lot, and they will be picking up litter from public areas around in and around Haltom City. Volunteers will be treated to a free lunch at Springfest directly following the cleanup, and that gets me into the next announcement. Don't miss Springfest, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Saturday, April the 5th. Easter egg hunt, food, crafts, booths, music, Easter bonnet contest, petting zoo, lots of family fun, and the best thing about it, it's all free. And I'd also like to make one other announcement while we're on the subject of announcements. At the last council meeting, City Council had sent a letter to the railroad, Union Pacific Railroad, and there's also a directive made to put a sign up at that railroad crossing, both at Haltom Road and McLean. The signs apparently got some attention. Wednesday, day after tomorrow, Union Pacific will be redoing the railroad crossing at Haltom Road. They'll have the road closed approximately 8 a.m. in the morning to about 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Fire department, police department have been notified, so this will be a little bit of inconvenience to you that are in and around that go up and down Haltom Road, but I think for the inconvenience it'd be well worth it. And Union Pacific has also, I think, let the city manager know that by the 17th of April they'll have the McLean crossing done too. So with the help of the sign and all you citizens calling in, we appreciate you doing that. And also I have one other one. We had a beautification banquets meeting a few weeks ago, and during that banquet meeting we had left out one of the very important individuals in this city that helps us on every time we have a any sort of a cleanup, any volunteering at all, and that's James Jimbo White. He's back there on the back row tonight. And Mr. White, I'd like to personally apologize for the beautification board and myself for inadvertently leaving you off that list. It wasn't on purpose. We just overlooked it. So we do thank you for all your efforts, and we figured this would be the best way to do it.
Members of the council, any further announcements or events? Okay, there being none, we move now to item number 9. This is a public hearing with a corresponding ordinance. Mr. James Pliska, our planning director, will introduce that, and we will proceed accordingly.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, citizens of Haltom City. This is to conduct a public hearing and consider the application of Mr. Ernest Hedgecoth, Consulting Engineers, on behalf of Mary Lancaster for a zoning change request from the C1 Commercial District to the C3 Commercial District on proposed lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Lancaster Addition, located on the east side of Denton Highway, containing approximately 3.160 acres of land located in the 4000 block of Denton Highway. The accompanying ordinance is O 2003-07-15 for this case. Consideration and/or action regarding the approval of an ordinance amending ordinance number O 2002-03215 as amended the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the City of Haltom City, Texas, for a zoning change from the C1 Commercial District to the C3 Commercial District on proposed lots 1 and 2, Block 1, Lancaster Addition, containing approximately 3.16 acres of land, and again located on the east side of Denton Highway. The site is currently a vacant parcel, and there will be a proposed development on Lot 1. Again, the applicant requested this change in order to develop Lot 1 of the proposed Lots 1 and 2. The existing zoning is C1 Commercial, and again, the land use is vacant. I list for you the adjacent zoning and land uses. Access to the property will be from Denton Highway. The site is designated as commercial according to the city's comprehensive land use plan, and therefore the requested rezoning would be in compliance with the plan. The property has been vacant for many years. The city has received a preliminary plat on the site in order to indicate how the area will develop. Legal notice regarding the public hearing was published in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram on February 14, 2003. Property owner notifications for all properties within 200 feet of the site were mailed out February 14, 2003. There were 21 properties notified. Staff received 0 in favor and 1 in opposition. I formally submit site map surrounding property owner information and the GIS aerial for your review. At their meeting on March 11, 2003, the P&Z voted 5-1 to recommend approval of the zoning change request from the C1 commercial district to that of C3 for this case, and I formally submit the accompanying ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Pliska. Before I open the public hearing, members of the council, any questions for Mr. Pliska on item number 9? Councilmember Williams?
I've got one, Mr. Pliska. You have one letter opposed. We don't have that in our packet. Is that usually forwarded on to us, or is it just?
That's usually just checked off when you don't have it in the packet. The letter will be sent out and it says, I do not have an objection, or I do have an objection.
Okay,
Generally.
the individual making the objection of it, was it like a person right next to the property, or
It would be
All right.
one within the 200 foot.
one within the
But
200?
there is nobody adjacent to the property in the residential district. Remember, there is a creek separating it from the residential district to the east.
If memory serves me, it's backed by vacant property on 2 sides.
Yes, sir.
And by a convenience store on the other side, and Denton Highway on the third.
Yes, sir. And then to the south, a church facility.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions for Mr. Pliska? Okay, there being none, this being a public hearing, I open the public hearing at this time. Any member of the audience who wishes to speak either for or against the change of this from commercial 1 to commercial 3 is invited to address the council. Mr. Hedgecote, are you wanting to address the council or just be available for
I was
questions?
just wanted to clarify a little bit. I wanted to show you some
Yes,
pictures,
please.
tell you a little bit of what is driving all of this. The Lot 1 is going to be developed. We've already submitted a preliminary and final plat for that. We're going to be constructing a car laundry facility. I thought that was pretty good. I like that. Car wash situation. It'll have, these are some pictures. Also, at the in the front part of the site, we're going to put a snow cone stand, which will give the people something to do while the kids can eat a snow cone while they're watching their daddy wash the cars. I think this will be a real high-class facility. There's the owners are Mr. Handy, James Handy, and he's here if you have any questions about the operation. He has one of these existing right now in North Richland Hills at the corner of Harwood and Highway 26 behind the Popeyes chicken place. It's been very successful, and they think this one will have one automatic bay. The rest of them will be manual. But as far as this area has been undeveloped for many years, as part of this development, we'll be bringing the utilities to the site and also to the entire length along Denton Highway there from Diamond Oaks Drive to Cedar Crest. And that will open up this 3 acres worth make it much easier to develop. As far as this property does back up to the creek, and there's over 200 feet nearly to the residences go to the center of the creek. Their property does. That's why they got notified. Actually, the houses will be more than 200 feet away from the property. The houses are up on Georgia, all along Georgia there, and then it drops down to the creek. But their property goes all the way to the center line of the creek. That's why they were notified. So as far as actual locations to the houses and to within there's over 200 feet of open space between the creek there, if you can see on your aerial photographs. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Members of the council, any questions for the consulting engineer on this project, Mr. Ernie Hedgecote? Councilmember Williams.
I've got one, and I assume that this will be a 24-hour operation. Will the lights be left on it for a full 24 hours, or?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
It'll be a 24-hour operation.
But the lights will not be facing back toward Georgine, they'll be facing toward Denton Highway.
Yeah. Everything will be directed down to the, away from the residential area. And like I say, right now, it'll be from where we are, it'll be probably 500 feet or more to any of the residences.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams? Thank you, Mr. Hedgecoe. We appreciate your presentation. Any member of the audience wishing to speak either for or against this application? Okay, there being none, the public hearing is closed, and I move now to the corresponding ordinance, and I'm in line for a motion. And Councilmember Hurley, I believe you had your light on, and then Councilmember Henderson.
Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance 02003-007-15.
Have a motion. Councilmember Henderson.
That's second.
Councilmember Fowler.
I was in line for a motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, if you'll register your vote, and that passes by unanimous vote of the council. Item number 10 is also a public hearing, and Mr. Pliska, if you would, introduce that one to us, please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the council, citizens of Haltom City. This is conditional use 002-03, and that is to conduct a public hearing and consider the application of Miss Betty Beck Blackwood for a conditional use permit with site plan approval for an auto paint and body shop in the C4 Commercial District on Lot 1A, Block 1 of the Beck Edition, located on the north side of Parish Road, containing approximately 0.7223 acres of land and locally known as 5011 Parish Road. The accompanying ordinance is O 2003-08-15, consideration and/or action regarding approval of an ordinance amending ordinance O 2002-03215 as amended, the comprehensive zoning ordinance of the City of Haltom City for a conditional use permit to allow for an auto paint and body shop in accordance with ordinance number 2002-03215, zoning ordinance section 36-2, conditional uses on Lot 1A, Block 1, Beck Edition, again containing approximately 0.7223 acres of land and locally known as 5011 Parish Road, and this is the first reading of that ordinance. The site is located on the north side of Parish Road. The applicant is requesting this conditional use permit with site plan approval in order to continue an operation of an auto paint and body shop on the site. The existing zoning is C4, and again, the land use is an existing auto paint and body shop. I'll list for you the adjacent land uses. Again, the site is designated as commercial district according to the city's comprehensive land use plan. The request use would be in compliance with the plan and with the required conditional use permit. This also entails our citywide initiative on rezoning auto paint and body shops. The site is zoned C4 Commercial District and does not allow for an automobile paint and body shop on the site without a CUP and with site plan approval. Therefore, the applicant is seeking this conditional use permit to allow a continued use of this site. Legal notice regarding the public hearing was published in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram February 14, 2003. Property owner notifications for all property within 200 feet of the site were mailed out on February 14, 2003. 17 properties were notified. Staff received 1 in favor and 0 in opposition. I formally submit the attached site plan, site map, property owner information, and your GIS aerial for your review. At the March 11th meeting of the P&Z, the P&Z voted unanimously to approve this item to allow for this conditional use permit and continue the automobile paint and body shop.
Thank you, Mr. Pliska. Members of the council, any questions for Mr. Pliska on this item before we open the public hearing? Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One question, James. I'm looking at the aerial here, and I notice immediately behind the building here, there appears to be either some smaller buildings or vehicles of some type stored on the grassy area.
That is correct, sir. Those were vehicles that were stored on unimproved surface.
Okay.
With the result of this conditional use permit, if you'll note on the site plan that he has since, where you see on the north portion of his site plan where you see that metal fence or panel, that is the grassy area that you see to the north.
Okay.
And that is now asphalt and is surrounded by fence. Also, that was showing cars as well that were left illegally on the surrounding property, and those have since been cleaned up.
Very good, sir. Thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Any further questions for Mr. Pliska? Okay, there being none, this being a public hearing, I open the public hearing at this time. This is the time for anyone in the audience who wishes to speak either for or against this application. And I believe, Ms. Blackwood, you're here tonight. Do you have anything to say to the council, or do you just want to be available in case we might have questions? Okay. All right. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak either for or against Ms. Blackwood's application? Okay, there being none, I close the public hearing at this time, and I'm in line for a motion, and I believe Councilmember Henderson had his light on first.
Thank you, Mayor. Move to approve ordinance number 0-2003-018-15.
Councilmember Fowler.
That's for a second, Mayor.
Councilmember Williams.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If you will, register your vote, and that passes by unanimous vote. We move now to item number 11, and I will need a motion regarding this item, and that motion should be explanatory of what we're going to be doing. Councilmember Hurley.
Mayor, I move that we table this item.
Have a motion to table, excuse me. Have a motion to table item number 11. Councilmember Williams.
Yes, I would second that motion with the, if you amend it, that we'll be discussing this in the executive session.
Correct.
Okay, so noted. We have a motion regarding item number 11, and do we have, you did second it, Councilmember Williams?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? If you will, register your vote, and that passes by unanimous vote. Item number 12 and 13 are very similar, and I don't know if you want to address both of them at one time. Mr. Pliska, if you want to do one, introduce those for us, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I will address both, and then you can vote on both items. This is item P005-03. That will be the fifth plat for this year. And that's consideration and/or action regarding the application, again, of Mr. Ernest Edgecott of Consulting Engineers Incorporated on behalf of Mr. Yancey and Ms. Tammy Lynn Freeman for the final plat of Lot 1, Block 1, Freeman Edition, being a final plat of Track 4D3 of the S. Sawyer Survey, Abstract 1424, located on the west side of Denton Highway, containing approximately .7546 acres of land located in the 5900 block of Denton Highway. The applicant is final platting the property in order to develop the site and to bring the lot into compliance with the city's subdivision ordinance. The site is located again on the west side of Denton Highway and contains approximately .7546 acres of land. Property is currently zoned M2 Heavy Industrial District. I list for you the utility company contacts. All have been contacted except for TXU. However, any request will be honored as received. Existing utility locations include 8-inch main in Denton Highway and sanitary sewer, also 8-inch main along the easement of Denton Highway. I formally submit for your review the 11 by 17 copy of this plat and the GIS aerial for your review. At their March 11th P&Z, the P&Z Commission voted unanimously recommend approval of final plat 005-03 to the City Council. The plat meets the minimum requirements of the city's subdivision ordinance. Also, the developer following is a variance for the sidewalks on this issue. Item number 13 is the variance for that, and that is P005-03. That's consideration and/or action regarding the variances to the city's subdivision ordinance. Article 12-100, improvements required. As to the sidewalk requirements on proposed Lot 1, Block 1, Freeman Edition, basically he's asking for relief on construction of the sidewalk due to the platting requirements. However, at their meeting on March 11th, 2003, the P&Z Commission voted 5-1 to deny this sidewalk variance request. Again, this platting is for development of this lot. It will be a proposed truck accessory facility with the construction of a building to house these accessories, and it will be for retail sales.
A question for our attorney before we proceed with this. Item 12 and 13 are very connected. and Mr. Pliska has explained both of them together. Can these be discussed together and a motion taken on item 12 and 13 in a common motion, or do we need to break that out and discuss each separately and take a separate motion?
Mayor, it would be my recommendation that the council act on these items separately.
Okay, we move forward then with the recommendation of council on item number 12. Any discussion or any questions for Mr. Pliska on item number 12? There being none, I'm in line for a motion regarding the wish of the council. Councilmember Fowler?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of P-005-03.
Councilmember Markham?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilmember Hurley?
That was for second.
Okay. Mr. Hedgecote, did you have something you wanted to say on this? Okay.
I believe he will on item number 13 there.
Okay. We have a motion and a second on item number 12. Any discussion from the council on the motion? If you will, register your vote. And that is a unanimous vote on item number 12. And now item number 13. Mr. Hedgecote, do you want to address the council regarding that, or just be available to?
I would like to address the council regarding that issue.
Okay.
I do hope that Mr. Langford's comments didn't prejudice anybody against my variance, because there is no school within 5 miles of this site. And one thing I wanted to point out to you, if you look on your aerial photograph there, the property to the immediate south of us this is an 83-foot strip of our property is 83 feet on Denton Highway. And the property immediately to the south of us is 70 feet that belongs to the Texas Highway Department. We'll never get a sidewalk out of the Texas Highway Department. Oh, okay. If you notice the property just to the south of us there, we did receive, I platted the property just on the other side of the drainage ditch there that the Highway Department owns last year, and you granted me a variance at that point, and that one, that was another tract of land, and you granted that variance. I went back and looked, and if you look at your map that has the little points on it, the only place that there's any sidewalk from Western Center to Belknap is right there on that lot 1A of the Denton Highway track. It's the O'Reilly's Auto Part place. That's the only one that has any sidewalks from Western Center all the way down to when you go all the way to Belknap there. So my point is, I agree with Mr. Langford, you got to have sidewalks, but there's not going to be anybody walking down Denton Highway. There's no schools involved. There's no residential property. This property backs up to the railroad tracks. It fronts on Denton Highway. There's no apartments. There's no anybody walking up and down Denton Highway. And I don't think it would even be a safe place for you to walk. My question would be, what good is 84 feet of sidewalk going to help? Is that going to beautify our city? And I just ask that you allow this variance to be in accordance with what else has been done up and down Denton Highway. I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Councilmember Fowler, I believe you had your light on first, and then Councilmember Jennings, Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Mr. Pliska. Were you in attendance at that P&Z or not?
No, sir, I was on vacation at the time, but the city engineer was present.
Okay, if you don't mind, then let me...
I would like to add, though, that a variance, let's try to consider it on a case-by-case basis. It
Yes,
really
sir.
doesn't set a precedent.
O'Reilly's did put in sidewalks,
Yes,
is
sir.
that correct? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Van Noon Hughes, could you explain to myself and I guess my colleagues or if you can, what the mindset of the planning and zoning was for denying or sending a consideration for denial?
Probably not. I don't want to put words in their mouth. However, I can tell you on a whole, as Mr. Langford indicated earlier, the Planning and Zoning Commission is in quite a quandary on what to do with this sidewalk situation. Some of the commission members have a firm belief that, this has gone on long enough. We have to start, and we have to start somewhere. And they have decided that when these variances come up, no matter what, they recommend against the variance. Then you have other members who are don't think that sidewalks are necessary at all. And then you have other members that, well, in this case it is, in this case it isn't. But it's been a problem for years, and I think it'd probably be a good idea if we do have a sidewalk ordinance, if we either, modified it, changed it, or, somewhere where we'd have some clear direction. Having a school within a couple of miles was, the first time I heard that was tonight, and that might be a good idea to include in there and let that be maybe one of the criteria on when to issue a variance and when not to. But it's been quite the quandary that there's no mechanism right now on maybe waiving sidewalks for now and escrowing money. That's something we may want to consider. But I think a policy such as that's going to take some type of council action, some type of maybe ordinance or resolution.
Well, and that's something that that you just alluded to that we had discussed as one of the options. That's why I asked Mr. Langford to bring that back to us. During my tenure on the Planning and Zoning Commission, that was one of the suggestions that I had made was, not necessarily requiring somebody to put a sidewalk in, but possibly in lieu of doing that, put funding sent to the city that if we ever had to go back in and redo a street or do something, that money's they've already put in their portion of the money for sidewalks, although they have been allowed to not place them on the property at that time, and then the rest of the citizens aren't asked to foot the bill for those who have, for businesses or residential that, it's come up numerous times. And
exactly, and we have a similar type ordinance for street construction.
Correct.
But I don't know, and I don't think it's very fair to ask Wayne tonight, but I don't know that you can construe that ordinance for streets for sidewalks as well. I myself would be more comfortable if we had a specific similar ordinance for sidewalks as we do on perimeter streets.
Well,
perhaps Wayne can comment.
I agree, and maybe that's something that Mr. Plissy
Let
can
me
come back
comment
with.
on it first. The best avenue for us to address it would be when we revisit the city subdivision ordinance. It was last written in 1995, and we are at the point now with the adoption of the comprehensive land use plan, with the rewrite of the zoning ordinance, we're ready to tackle the development ordinance. And at that time, it would be the best to address it either via a special assessment, escrow, or the mandatory construction of sidewalks as we go through these plating processes.
Okay, thank you. If you would just stay on top of that so that we can get something clarified.
Yes, sir.
In the near future.
We stand ready to tackle it. I had to put it off because the former chair wanted to retire and not take that on. He wanted to just finally do the city's zoning ordinance. Chairman Worthington. Mr. Langford, again, has expressed his desire now to look at that situation, and we will be addressing it within the next few meetings.
Thank you.
Anything further, Councilmember Fowler?
No, sir, just in line for motion when you're ready.
Okay, Councilmember Jennings and then Councilmember Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ernie, I got a couple for you if you'd like to approach the podium here.
Sure, be glad to.
What are we talking dollars and cents here, cost of this sidewalk?
84 feet of sidewalk, I'd guess maybe $2,500.
$2,500.
Be a guess.
All right.
Trey could probably answer that question better.
Pretty close to it.
Pretty close. Based on what you know about your client here and what they're trying to accomplish here, number one, I would like to know if you feel like they would be receptive to escrowing money for the construction of a sidewalk if we went in that direction. That's the first question.
You want an answer? I was
wanna
waiting
know
for
how
the second question.
I want to know how you feel they would feel about that.
Well, I don't
They
think
want some type of decision.
I don't think that $2,500 is going to stop them from doing their development. My question is to you is it going to be worth $2,500 to the city to have 84 feet of sidewalk when you know immediately adjacent to it, 70 feet is not ever going to be developed, and the property to the other side, the 150 feet, is already variance to there, so that's not going to be developed. The rest of the way, all the way down to past Loop 820 is not going to have a sidewalk in it. So why should my guy have to pay $2,500 for 84 feet of sidewalk when nobody else is going to have to do it?
Okay, understand
I mean,
that.
that's my
Okay.
my rationale there.
Question number two. Let us say hypothetically that we granted a variance for the sidewalk. Do you feel like your client would be receptive to spending an additional amount of money for landscaping along the frontage of Denton Highway there when that is developed.
I'm sure he will comply with the landscape ordinance.
Right,
Yeah.
but I meant over and above the, step right in
I'd
there.
like to comment on that. That's a very good point, because this is zoned heavy industrial, and we have very limited landscaping requirements for this site.
Right. So would that be done at the time of site plan approval? How would that be done?
We could handle it, you could authorize it with the adoption of this plat, and I can tag it on during the building process before the building is final. But for an M2 heavy industrial area, for me to get any landscaping, he has to have parking for over 20 vehicles. And at that point, it's 5% of the vehicle parking area
Right.
is the required landscaping. So it's a relatively light landscaping requirement there.
Okay. Well, based on what I've seen here, I, for one, do not see the necessity for 84 feet of sidewalk along Denton Highway. But if that is in fact going to be an industrial type facility, M2 facility, right on the main thoroughfare entering our city, I can certainly see the need for making it as aesthetically pleasing as possible. So I would take the position that I would lean toward granting the sidewalk variance with the stipulation that once this site plan came before the council of P&Z, that there was some type of stipulation in there that we could mandate landscaping over and above the criteria currently set up for that particular zoning.
Mr. Torres, you seem like you're just chomping at the bits here.
Well,
making a comment.
I guess my concern is that item number 12 has already approved the plat, so it's kind of hindsight. Can we go back now and attach something to item number 12? Seems to me very difficult to do. It seems.
But it is a
Do not-
bargaining table for me during the development process in which the client submits a development plan. I have not seen a development plan for this particular parcel.
We're not trying to attach it to the plat, Richard. We're trying to attach it to the site plan at the time the site plan is submitted.
Won't that require some modification to our subdivision regulations to in lieu of sidewalks, additional landscaping requirements or
I
something?
have to defer to legal
you know,
at this
in-
point. We're just talking about whether to grant him relief on a variance or not. In my limited view, a variance is a relaxation of the ordinance, so I would think we'd have a little bit of bargaining here, but I may be out of the ballpark here.
I think there are some good suggestions that are being thrown out by the council, but unfortunately, we're a little bit limited in what we can do tonight because we're dealing with a specific ordinance that allows for a variance under specific circumstances. It sounds like we may need to revisit the ordinance and come up with some criteria that will be used in the future for consideration in granting sidewalk variances, and maybe we need to revisit some other issues pertaining to certain types of development such as this. Right now, I would interpret Councilmember Jennings' comments as being questions for the applicant as to whether or not he's willing to perform some additional landscaping. But we really are somewhat held back in what we can or can't do with regard to this variance. We really have one issue in front of us tonight, and that is whether to grant the sidewalk variance. And Mr. Hedgecoth can hopefully give us some comfort level on whether his client would be willing to consider some additional landscaping at the site plan and development stage of this, but I don't know that he can be obligated to do so as a condition of the variance tonight. These are issues we can look at when we take on the task of reviewing the subdivision ordinance and the requirements for sidewalks, but let's try to stay within the bounds of what we've got to work with tonight.
We don't have a site plan made up yet, Phil, but we only got 84 feet, and we'll be glad to work with as much landscaping as James feels is satisfactory. I don't think...
Are you at liberty to discuss what may be going in here at this time? Do you know what?
Well, right now, Mr. Freeman operates the truck accessory facility down at at 121 and Carson Street, you know, the little triangle section. And the business has been good, and that's probably what they're going to do up there, is open a truck accessory place of some sort. And I
So it'd be a
haven't,
retail type.
yes, sir, very similar to what they've got down there now.
Why would they want heavy industrial zoning for a retail
That was
operation
just what
like
it was
that?
zoned. We didn't ask for that zoning. It was just zoned that when we bought the property.
It's an old zoning that it's been there forever, and remember our zoning ordinance is comprehensive, so it goes.
Right.
Whatever could happen.
Any
That's-
use.
Yes, sir,
Right.
that's a C2 retail facility, but it is allowed in M2.
Okay.
And we didn't ask for the zoning change. It was just there when we bought the property. And, but right now, that's my best guess of what will go in there is some sort of a truck accessory facility.
Okay. Well,
And as far as landscaping,
based
I'm-
on what you've told me and what Wayne has interjected into the conversation here, I still gonna have to stick by my guns here. I don't really see any need for a sidewalk right there.
Thank you.
I just couldn't, in good conscience, vote to have someone build that 84-foot sidewalk. But as far as the citizens are concerned and what we'd like our city to look like, I certainly would like your assurances that at least you would talk to the person that's gonna be doing this and let them know that we would certainly like to have something nice coming into our city there as much as possible.
I'll work very closely with this client and his partner, and I will certainly do everything I can to increase the landscaping to meet your needs and the city's needs, make it an attractive facility for the city.
That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Williams was next in order, but Councilmember Fowler has a special question, I think, for the attorney or something. Councilmember Williams,
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Would it be within reason to, when do you propose putting a site plan forth?
Well, probably right away. I mean, I'd say within the month. Sometime next month, we'll bring it to the council.
Would it be within reason, Mr. Olson, to table this until that point, till site plan's brought forth, and then making a decision on the variance at that point?
You have the authority to do that.
Okay.
I don't know, Mr. Hitchcock can comment on how that will impact him, but you certainly have a legal right to do that.
Well, that might provide them an opportunity to do some, when you present your site plan, to do some things that might be attractive, you know.
We're going to make this as a very attractive facility, you know. I mean, the more attractive it is, the better people will want to come and buy their truck accessories there. And, you know, I'm just saying, it doesn't matter how attractive we make it, 84 feet of sidewalk is not going to help the city in any way whatsoever. And so this variance is, you know, I feel like it will not be something that would be helpful to the city. We'll be glad to make it as attractive to the city as possible. I would ask that you'd go ahead and grant this variance, just so it won't be hanging over our head somewhere. But we will be working on the site plan, and we'll be getting that in probably next month sometime to the P&Z, and it'll come back, I guess, to y'all sometime in the last part of April or May.
Thank you.
Councilmember Williams.
Mr. Hedgecoth, I appreciate your comments on the sidewalk and about the Texas Highway Department. I don't like when we hear that they're not going to do anything. You know, we have to do everything they want to do. I was sitting there making some notes while we were talking about this, and I'm glad you brought up the owner of the facility. I know who you're talking about now. They took a facility, and I wasn't on the council at the time that they put that in, but they went far beyond what was required of the city when they built that facility. And the gentleman has also developed some more property in this town, and I think Mr. Pliska can say that everything he's done top notch. 84 foot of sidewalk, I'll have to disagree with my little brother down there. I would rather put 84 foot of sidewalk in and water and mow and edge and cut around it than I would, landscaping if I had to choose between the two. I know at the major intersection crossings on State Highway down there, you say, well, there's no use to have the sidewalks on the State Highway because there's no school within 2 miles or 5 miles. I think it's American Disabilities Act has made the state now and also cities put wheelchair ramps at every intersection. And it seems kind of weird that we would have to put wheelchair ramps at the intersection and not have any sidewalks for the wheelchairs to go down. I'm going to disagree with everybody now. I disagree with Trey on putting the money back. I think as a property owner, I can hold that money just as good as the city can. And then when it comes time to put the sidewalks in, we could put the sidewalks in, if they're required. After finding out who the owner of the property is, they've always gone far and beyond. And I don't think I think they'll probably landscape it more than what, but I would hate to put them under any restrictions, because would we, and I guess this would be for Wayne, would we setting a precedence if we did that? Would we have to do it on every one we had, or?
I'm sorry, John, if you did what?
If we set if we said that he had to put the landscape in with the, in exchange for the sidewalks, would we be setting a precedence?
At this stage, I'm a little uncomfortable with making that a condition of granting a variance to the sidewalk. I think that's an issue that we can certainly address in another manner in the future if the council thinks that that's something we need to be considering on these applications. But I don't think we have the tools to get there tonight with the ordinance written the way it is.
Thank you.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams?
No.
Councilmember Fowler,
I'm just in line for a motion.
please proceed.
Mayor, I move we table P-005-03 variance until our staff has time to look at the site plan, and then possibly we have input back from the Planning and Zoning Commission on their consideration of what to do with these future items.
Okay, we have a motion to table. Do I have a second? No one has indicated second. I'll call for a second again, second time. Do I have a second for the motion to table item number 13? Councilmember Williams.
I'm in line for another motion whenever this one dies.
Okay. Since we do not have a second to the motion to table, that motion dies, and I am in line for a motion. Councilmember Williams.
I want to apologize to my colleague, Mr. Fowler. I didn't mean for it to sound that way.
That's quite all right.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for a sidewalk on P-005-03-VAR.
We have a motion to approve the variance. Councilmember Hurley.
That's second.
Councilmember Jennings.
I think our attorney's jumping up and down there wanting to say something. I can see him from here.
Okay.
I don't have to read this now.
Thank you.
I got to read it now.
You got to read it. If this, if you're going to make the affirmative motion to approve, the council needs to make specific findings in order to grant this variance. Go for it, Mr. Williams.
Council requirement, variance requirements. The council must determine that special conditions exist, i.e. the piece of property involved is unique and is not configured the very same way as any other lot in the tract area. For example, the uniqueness of the shape and design, it makes it impossible to comply with the provisions of the zoning ordinance and our subdivision ordinance. In addition to showing that parcel of tract is unique and contains properties or attributes not common to other similarly situated properties, the applicant must show that the need for the variance has not been created. An applicant may not come before the city council and seek variance to cure a problem that the applicant himself has created by prior development activity. The applicant must further show that any hardship is not a financial loan. The fact is that it will cost a great deal of money to correct the problem. Not sufficient grounds for the granting of the variance is that it's the only reason for what is sought. Financial hardship can be one of the number of reasons for which a variance is granted. The applicant must show the literal enforcement of the terms of zoning ordinance and subdivision ordinance will work in a hardship on his property and denying him responsibility of the property. The council cannot and should not consider what the zoning categories the property might be placed for council action. The individual tract in question and current zoning identified permitted uses. The council is simply here to consider those available uses and see if there are any other reasonable use of the property can be made with existing zoning classification. That the variance requested is minimal necessary, and finally, no special privilege is granted which is denied to other similarly situated uses. In order to grant a variance, the city council must affirmatively find it all above carries. I think next time I'll deny it.
Any council member who votes in favor of this motion needs to understand you are making a finding
I think they all have to read
affirmative on
that.
each of those.
Sometimes
It meets
we,
criteria.
excuse me.
And just for the record, I didn't put those finding requirements in the ordinance. I'm not a big believer in those, but they are
Someone
required.
put them in my packet, though.
They are required.
For the information of those of you who are sitting out in the audience that wonders what in the heck is going on, our ordinance does require, if we grant a variance to the sidewalk requirements, that we have to do this finding of fact on the variation requirements, and it's all got to be read into the motion. So that's a legalese requirement, and Councilmember Hurley, your second reflects that. Would you like to repeat?
No, sir.
Just, okay.
I'll
Okay,
take,
we have a
I'll
motion.
take Councilman Williams' word for it.
We have a motion and a second to approve the variance on item number 13. Any discussion on the motion? If you will, Councilmember Jennings?
Well, I barely got that one in under the light, didn't I?
Just barely.
I just wanted to make sure that you were up to snuff on what we want to do as far as revisiting the sidewalk ordinance when we start the subdivision. We need to come up with some type of a plan to where we take into consideration what's around these places that we're going to do and existing sidewalks within areas. And I just wanted staff to be aware of the direction that we wanted to take there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Fowler?
I was just going to ask Councilmember Williams to restate that motion for clarification.
Okay,
See,
we
hang on one second, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. Just after the kidding. No, Mr. Pliska, you know, and I just happened to see Mr. Nichols here also. If y'all would, I'm sure that y'all can relay this to the P&Z members. That way we can get to work on this thing pretty quickly. See the importance of it for clarification purposes. Thank you.
Okay, we have had discussion on the motion. Any further discussion? If you'll register your vote. And that passes with one negative vote. Okay? We move now to item number 14.
Well, not necessarily. I can.
Okay, please.
Mayor, Mr. Pat Elfrink, our finance director, is going to deliver our monthly financial report for through the end of February, and then I've got a few comments I think I should make that would be appropriate too. So go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. February marks the end of 5 months in our fiscal year. And unfortunately, the financial picture, our sales tax revenues and some other revenues, each month have underperformed what our expectations are with regard to the budget. You have before you a report that focuses on the general fund, the water and sewer fund, the crime control and prevention district fund, EDC, and the many other funds that we have here in the city. I'm going to try and give you a very brief synopsis of what some of the news is that we have here, which not all of it's bad, but unfortunately the good does not outweigh the bad news that we have here. On page 6, you will find, no, excuse me, page 8, you will find a chart that summarizes all 4 of the sales tax sources that the city has: the general fund, EDC, the crime district, and the new one that is entering its first full year is for the street maintenance reconstruction tax. This chart sums up all of those and shows that in total of all 4, we budgeted $7.2 million. Right now, our forecasting mechanism we have here, which is not perfect, which can certainly change we're forecasting about a 12% shortfall, which comes out to $992,000 in total. For the general fund, that means a $632,000 shortfall. For the street maintenance fund, it's $145,000. For the crime district, it's just under $200,000 at $198,000. And for EDC, it's about $16,000 under budget if the trend continues for the rest of the year. And unfortunately, with the closing of one of our largest retailers in the next few days, actually, I expect the trend probably will continue to be worse unless we have some sort of miraculous recovery here in the city. One of the things that happened recently that is not on this report, but I'm one of the believers that bad news doesn't get better with age, is week before last, we received our annual single payment for our electric franchise. We budgeted $1.5 million for that payment. It came in at 1.3, so that was another $200,000 shortfall that we're working into our budget expectations. And then finally, on the not so good news side, our court revenues continue to lag behind previous years with regard to fines and fees and warrant collections. We have a possible shortfall there. And we still have a lot of work to do because we're entering into a new phase of software there, but we have a possible shortfall of $250,000 out of a $970,000 budget, so that's a pretty significant shortfall there. On the good news side for the general fund, we have examined our position vacancy savings, and this is through normal attrition that's occurred so far this year. This does not have the impact of the recently installed hiring freeze that has been put into place. With just normal attrition, we have a possible savings of $350,000 in the general fund alone. We had a payment that was not budgeted for from one of our larger apartment complexes. It's the only deal that we have like this. They don't pay us property taxes. They pay us a payment in lieu of taxes. I think they receive some sort of federal tax benefit from doing this. It was the first year for that tax payment to take place. It was $82,000 that was not budgeted. This is on the positive side. And then I've repeated this to the council several times. When our group health coverage was awarded last fall, the general fund had a savings of about $78,000. That's a total of $510,000 in savings so far. It doesn't make up the total savings that we need in the general fund, but it's certainly some very significant progress. And the city manager said he was going to follow up with some comments, and I expect he'll comment on the hiring freeze and some other things that we're doing. Moving past the general fund, the water fund seems to be tracking well. We haven't had a really wet winter. I might do a drought dance sometime in the near future to try and have a dry summer. That would help us out a lot in the water fund. But also we have an outside consultant who is performing an in-depth analysis of our water and sewer rates to ensure that we stay financially stable there. There were concerns at the end of the last fiscal year about the proper level of revenues in the water fund. We still have $22.4 million invested. Most of that is for capital projects. I would say about 95% of it. Most of it is subject to a strange term called arbitrage, whereas we are not allowed to earn more interest than we are paying on this debt. And so with interest earnings being at a historical lows, unfortunately, we're earning only an average about 1.4% on that $22 million, which is just terrible, but we're restricted from going higher up in our earnings. With that, I don't have anything else to say, but if there's any questions or any comments from the council, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
If we might, Mr. Torres, would you make your comments, and then we'll open the floor to members of the council for questions regarding this.
I just have a few brief comments to kind of jump on Pat's comments about the financial condition of the city. I don't think there's any reason yet to be overly alarmed. Certainly the downturn in the economy is affecting us, but we're not much different than any other city in the area. Virtually everyone is being affected to some degree. So about a week and a half ago, in fact, I did implement a hiring freeze that will now take a little bit of careful review because I think that we're still going to have to come in and fill a few of these positions, but we're going to be very careful about which ones we do, and we make some determination as to which are the most essential positions that need to be filled. We're also going to be taking a look at some other cutback areas, specifically large capital improvement projects, capital items that had been proposed to be purchased throughout the fiscal year. We're going to be, over the next week or two, we're going to be taking a look at that. I've discussed some with the various directors about the situation and really put everybody on alert to be watching your budget. There will be meetings held in the next few weeks, and there'll be some negotiation about projected cutbacks and you know what they can offer and what I feel they need to offer up, and so we'll just have to see how that goes. And I'm sure I'll be writing the City Council an in-depth memo in the next few weeks after we have had an opportunity to sit down and analyze it. I don't. Again, I'm not overly concerned. I think this is just some motions we have to go through, and my expectation is not to deliver the city at the end of our fiscal year in a financial condition that's any worse than we started the fiscal year in. So I feel pretty confident we can do that. Yes, it will take some cutbacks. I hope that it won't affect any level of service that we're delivering, but there might be some expectation that would have to occur. So we'll just kind of leave it. I'll leave that with you, and if you have any comments or concerns now, certainly we'll try to address them, or in the future, if y'all would like to discuss it in more depth, I'd be happy to do that.
Councilmember Williams?
Thank you, Mr. Elfrink. Do you foresee anything else, bad news in the future as far as loss of revenue?
Well, I really don't know what the full impact is of the Kmart store closing, and the Kmart loss of revenue is really not factored into these estimates. We will still continue to receive sales tax payments from Kmart sales through the end of March, and that last payment for March will be received in May. So this forecast really is based on past history with Kmart in there, and I didn't really want to throw that on the table until I had a chance to speak with the manager on some of these issues. But with Kmart out of the picture, the sales tax revenue forecast just gets a little gloomier, I'm afraid.
I would like to point out that I'm glad before we got the hiring freeze on, that we did hire the second economic development person, and both of those people are working very hard right now to fill those empty and vacant spots,
right,
and also bring new retail to the city, so possibly with their efforts we can get those replaced.
It's the general fund. The general fund that is in a crisis mode. Basically EDC, which has 2 employees and huge amounts of projects that could be scaled back. But the general fund, as was pointed out in a newspaper article recently when I was asked by the reporter for some of these issues, about some of these issues, the general fund is kind of like, that's where all of the staffing is at. And the projects are accounted for separately. So the general fund is primarily a mechanism to pay the staffing and the operational needs of the city. The major capital projects are separately accounted for. And they're separately paid for. They're from bond money primarily. The general fund is where the bulk of the staffing is, and then it's the water fund. But when sales tax goes down dramatically like this, it's very hard to find ways to offset that.
And even more importantly than the fiscal year that we're operating in now, we've now begun the process for preparing the budget for next year. And I think that's where our biggest challenge is going to be, is preparing a budget for you to begin next October 1 that can meet all the expectations of this downturned economy. So we got a lot of work ahead, and most certainly the city council will be right in the middle of that with us by the middle of summer.
I think we are fortunate, though, that we're not like Arlington and some of the other towns that are having to lay people off. So I'm glad that we have those job openings where we don't have to lay one off at this time.
Right. And I mentioned that this morning in our staff meeting, that my hopes are that there are no layoffs. We have, Jonita, maybe you can help me, how many vacant positions, full-time positions that are out there right now? There's probably 12, 14 different positions in various departments. So there's a, just those 14 positions alone, if we can just hold those open until the end of the year, will generate quite a bit of surplus. And, we don't need to be alarmed yet, but I just want you to know that the staff is going to be working very hard to make sure things stay in line and we don't exceed anything we shouldn't.
I didn't really go into the expenditure side too much, but the good news too is really that 41% of the year has passed, and on the expenditure side, we are not above 41% expenditures. We're at that point. But again, part of that is the simple fact that many of our expenditures are staff-driven. I think we had less than $40,000 of capital expenditures in total in this budget this year. It's very minimal.
Anything further, Councilmember Williams? Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Richard. Does the hiring freeze that you've put into effect, does that also take into consideration public safety, fire, and police? Or are those positions being filled?
Correct. No, public safety positions are a large part of those 14 vacancies. And in fact, well, I was going to say all those positions are funded in the general fund, but that's not true because there's 8 positions that are filled, that are funded through the crime district fund. And again, that's not saying we don't need to be that we only have to be concerned about the general fund, because certainly all these funds, water and sewer and the whole variety of funds, we need to keep some balance to those. But in answer to your question, a large part of those 14 are police. There are 5 police officer positions right now vacant and 2 dispatcher positions vacant. So 7, half of the 14 are within the police department. The fire department is full. There are no vacancies there.
Okay, thank you.
That is good.
Anything further? Further questions or comments for either Mr. Elfrink or Mr. Torres? Okay, there being none, I'm in line for a motion to accept this monthly financial report. Councilmember Williams?
I've been in line to make that motion if we could take a short break after this.
We can. Councilmember Henderson?
For a second.
Have a motion and a second. If you'll register your vote. That passes by unanimous vote, and we'll take 5 or 10 minutes break. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the council meeting is called back into session. The time is 9:16. We're ready to move forward now with item number 15. Mr. Torres, would you like to introduce item number 15?
This is our monthly capital improvement status report. It's going to be delivered tonight by Mr. Tom Muir, our Assistant City Manager.
Mayor and Council, I don't know if, because of that break you took, are you intending for me to take a long time, or? No, it's going to be very brief. I'll try and make it brief.
Carson Street?
It's not quite
That wasn't
finished
brief?
yet, yeah. We're going to dangle that carrot out at you a little bit longer. My report, I said it'll be complete in a couple of weeks. It's really it's a matter of days, depending on the weather. But in all probability, be a couple of weeks, but we're pouring concrete driveways now and allowing them to cure. So it'll, again, it'll hopefully next week, but it's certainly by Christmas, yes. Broadway, as you've, if you haven't driven a couple of weeks ago, the traffic was changed on Jean and between Jean and Beach. It's very nice along that stretch. The rest of the streets a little less than desirable, but we're paving between Jean and Haltom Road. We're continuing with the sanitary projects, the sanitary sewer improvements, utility improvements. The road was closed today to work on some of that stuff right there around the bridge, but that was only for today. And we are commencing on some environmental remediation down there at the south portion of Broadway down there near Beach. The Lindsay, Revere, and Roxy bid documents were recently issued to use concrete on those streets instead of asphalt. Those were originally planned for asphalt. So Revere and is it Roxy and Lindsay have already been cut up? Is that right? Roxy and Revere have already been cut up. I mean, with the utility works, we're waiting on the concrete, so it's unfortunate that those residents are going to have to wait a little bit. But I think overall they're going to be much happier with the concrete streets, and it'll be much easier for us to maintain. Jerry and Mona, we've recently completed a bid process. Excuse me, on Jerry and Mona, we recently it's been substantially complete. We told you that last month. We're still commencing with the final inspections on that project. On Joy Lee, we recently opened bids for that. For Joy Lee, from Katrine to Mona, recently opened bids for the street work for that. We bid it either asphalt or concrete, and the concrete came in looking very, very good. So you'll see an item coming up maybe next meeting, certainly by the following meeting, second meeting in April, with a bid recommendation for that, for concreting that, those two, that street, between those two streets. The bridge replacement in Midway had a little bit of difficulty. TxDOT's been managing that project. TxDOT is changing the project management on that to hopefully improve that. We've had some difficulties with the contractor, but TxDOT is addressing it. Little Fossil Creek improvements project. This is a core project. Congress did release the funds. We've been kind of waiting on them to release the funds. No progress has been made on the design phase of that. With release of the funds, the city has recently received an agreement for the design phase, and will be forwarded to the council for consideration and action in a future meeting. As far as sanitary sewer, the Big Fossil Creek multi-jurisdictional sanitary replacement project. This is the cooperative effort between Fort Worth, Haltom City, North Richland Hills, and Richland Hills, and a bunch of other cities in the area. This is headed by the COG. The Corps is going to be doing the design. When at the meeting last week, they originally design was going to be finished in early '04, with right-of-way acquisition taking a couple of years, and then construction commencing thereafter. Last week, they informed us it was going to take an extra year. Just didn't really, just kind of informed us of that. Didn't really give us a reason why, or really inform us or negotiate with us. Or just kind of told us matter of factly it's going to take another year. We've got some concerns and problems with that, and we've voiced them, as have the other cities. So we're working with the COG and the Corps on those issues, but that thing has kind of hit a little bit of a snag, a significant one if it's going to be a year, but it is all going to be in the design phase of the project. Regarding the administrative order, item 11 you tabled tonight about B&H, and I won't argue into that. You'll be briefed on that fully in the executive session tonight. The manhole rehab project from Info Rehab, we're getting closer to completion. We're still missing we still got about 25 manholes that are being contested. Info Rehab is working with us. We're re-televising them and going be working with them and the engineer, so we are progressing. It's just kind of going a little slow, but it is progressing. One project that is moving very well is the sewer replacement project at the Big Fossil Creek drainage basin. That's being performed by Circle C, and they are moving very well and according to schedule, about 25% complete. The building construction projects, we don't have any more groundbreaking scheduled. We've had them for the last couple of months. Everything is moving. There's dirt moving. The only one I really kind of want to bring attention to is at the fire station. There was a concrete vault, a tank that was found during excavation in the ground. We are working with the engineers and the architects and to remove that. Public Works is taking care of performing a lot of that work so that we don't have to incur extra cost from the contractor in doing that. But this was something that didn't quite plan on doing, but it is being worked on. It's still in the hole right now. We're still digging around it. Beautification project on Belknap. It's a TxDOT project. The bids came in a month ago. Came in budget. TxDOT's awarded a contract to Meridian Construction. They should be beginning construction sometime early to mid next month. And with that completes my report.
Councilmember Williams, Councilmember Jennings, in that order, please.
Got a couple of questions for you, Mr. Muir. On the Revere Street, the reconstruction of Revere Street, do you have the blocks of the 100 blocks?
No, I don't.
Are the cross streets?
No, I don't.
Will it be all the way to Webster? Do you know that?
No, I'm not prepared to answer that right now.
I have a map in my office, if that'll be helpful, or do you need the block numbers?
Well, down the 3500 block, they're having a lot of trouble with the water main down there. I think they got more of those couplers on that, and then they got water mains. And I had a citizen call me the other day and asked me about when they were going to start construction.
This is in the 3500 block?
Yes.
Okay.
It's right off Webster Street.
We'll look into that.
Y'all can.
I think it does start at Webster, but I don't think it goes all the way up to Stanley Keller.
No, it's only
Stephanie, I think is what he said.
2 or 3 blocks.
Yeah.
And the other, you was talking about the Belknap beautification project. We've got some other projects that I spoke with you about. And I just want to bring the public's attention to it. Down close to the Shannon Center, the $200-something thousand deal that TxDOT put in for us. It's the
those medians?
yes, the eastern coming in from the east side.
Yes.
Some of the plants were looked like they didn't make it through the winter, and there's a lot of the weeds and stuff. Are we in the process of getting that?
It's more of a maintenance issue from maintaining the medians, and that is something we're going to be addressing. Yes.
So that is on.
As far as the plants, I haven't quite determined the plants. When I drove by there, the plants look more dormant than they did dead. I think it's still their dormant season right now. The grass and stuff we're going to be dealing with.
Well, also across the creek from that, I don't know if Public Works, since we have a new Public Works director, on the east side of the creek down there in the median by the Baker Boulevard Apartments coming back westbound towards Shannon Center, up on top of that hill, there's an area up there that we redone too and put some landscaping stuff in. Mm-hmm. And I don't know really if Mr. Fain's aware that's part of ours as well.
Yeah, that's something that part of the mowing contract that we've recently awarded to would be manning that and taking care of that.
Okay, now there's some of that we don't want to mow because it's landscaping they put in.
Of course.
Okay.
Now the landscaping of it with the bushes and whatnot, those are something that we'll have to deal with separately.
Okay, but they are looking at that as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jennings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regard to the 820 access road project, could we say December on that? I know that we're looking forward to Carson Street. I was wondering if they've given any kind of a time frame for that.
I could not. I've made attempts trying to hook up with TxDOT, and our economic development director has been kind of heading this Yeah, Greg's got no idea.
Greg has no
Not on this one. Kent's been kind of working this a little bit, and with Kent's schedule, Kent's been out for a couple of weeks with a back, and my efforts to try and get TxDOT have not been productive. So as far as getting a complete update on that, I don't have one for you
They
tonight.
haven't even gotten close with any other previous dates. You know, they were telling us October, and then then it's December, and it's February, and now I mean they don't even have a date as far as I know, and it's almost like construction has stopped. I mean, they did the grading and everything,
They did
but
the grading, they done asphalt out there. I mean, they've started, they laid asphalt.
Is it going to be concrete now on top of that?
Yes.
Asphalt?
Yes.
so it possibly could be a concrete problem for them. Aren't we pouring concrete over on Carson?
Yes, we are. The contractor is, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so to answer my question, no, you do not have any type of a date that they've given you on that yet.
Man, any dates I give you
Yeah,
guys on these things are.
Oh, but we don't hold your feet to the fire on them. We're going to accept
No.
that December deal on Carson Street.
We're still holding to the April timeframe as far as that.
April this year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm not aware of a
Okay.
change to that.
Basically, the way I understand this is that access road is going to go to Anderson.
Yes.
And dead end at Anderson.
Yes.
And from Anderson on up to Haltom Road, there won't be any type of access. Are they supposed to shut the Haltom Road exit down on either side? Have they made up their mind what they're going to do there? Because we were told at one time that they were going to shut down the exit going west, and then that they were going to fix that exit. Have you heard anything different on that?
The latest I've heard with the widening of Loop 820, not as part of the access road project, but the widening of Loop 820, yes, we'll lose the Haltom Road exit
Completely.
both directions.
Both directions.
Correct. But what will happen is, TxDOT's told me, now again, whether this comes to fruition or not, I can't tell you, but the exit at Denton Highway, when you're going westbound, can say exit for both Denton Highway and Haltom Road, and you just stay on the access road. You exit at Denton Highway, but stay on the access road, and you'll be able to take a right or a left on Haltom Road. There will be full access roads on both sides in that area.
How are they going to work that around that railroad track?
That's a difficulty, but
Yeah.
I think they're going underneath.
We can't even get one fixed, let alone
Right.
get a street built over under
Right
one.
now, they're looking at having a huge retaining wall. I know at least on the south side, because that dictated where the entrance to that hotel could be, was a retaining wall because of the railroad tracks.
Well, right now, I'd just be happy with an access road, and we'll worry about the freeway when that time comes. Yeah. That's all I got. Thank you. What's that?
Councilmember Fowler.
Mr. Mayor, percentage complete on Broadway. I know they seem to be progressing pretty well, so, or Mr. Van Nuys, I guess you're going to defer.
I would say they are 70 to 80% on the utilities. In terms of the underground utilities, they are pretty much done. They've got some minor work left between Beach and Haltom Road. Between Haltom Road and Denton Highway, they've pretty much got 100% of the water in, maybe half of the sewer, and very little of the storm drainage. So project-wise, like I said, I'd guess them to be somewhere with 75% with the underground utilities. With the paving, as you see it right now, I guess it'd be 1/4. It's almost all the way down on the north side between Beach and Haltom Road. And I would say since that's half the project and they've only got half of that done, I'd say roughly 25%, maybe a little bit under that, because they do have to tie in some additional driveways. So overall on the project, typically the utilities are about 50% of the value of the whole project, maybe somewhere around 50% done. So
I would say that's within reason, just for our viewers and for our citizens that are here. You know, they've already started lime stabilization on other parts of it, so understanding as we spoke last time, it should move a little quicker once they get to the paving portion. It should pick up the pace quite a bit. One other question, and I do want to hold y'all's feet to the fire on this. What about Carson? When are we legitimately going to be through with it? Because I'm
Driving on it, I talked to as recently as late last week, and he said we're looking at weather dependent, end of this week or next week, that soon.
So worst case scenario, assuming we don't get
Sometime next week.
they'll have it opened up completely?
Right. Yeah, you're right, but he still has to do some work on the side streets. He still
Right.
has to do, he will have to do some utility work. There's 2 areas where the sanitary has to be fixed on the northbound lanes on the east side, but what he intends to do is just barricade that area off. During construction, in order to, I hate to use the term speed up construction and Carson in the same sentence.
Let's not
So-
use that.
But I'll give it a shot.
You
But
fell for
in
like
order
the
to try
second.
tie in the sanitary at Linton, all of Carson sanitary flows into Linton and then goes east. The quickest way to do it was to leave the existing sewer through the new storm drain. Then once the project was done and he's got the new sanitary in, he can go back, there's a junction box there, cut out the old sanitary, plug that up because it's not necessary, and go on. So he'll have to do that work there, and he has to modify a manhole up just immediately south of Belknap. And again, those are both on the far east side of Carson in your northbound lanes. So he has everybody on schedule for once I'm sure you've noticed, once he was done with the asphalt, the steel layers were in there. As soon as the steel layers were done, the formers were in, and then he poured concrete. So he's got everybody lined up to go one after the other. The biggest problem that I'm running into is that he's been pouring concrete on Monday and Tuesdays of the week. The reason why that hurts me is the state requires a minimum of 72 hours before they'll break beams. They pour additional beams to test the concrete to determine its strength. If I could get the weather to cooperate and pour on a Thursday or Friday, I could break the beams on Monday and we could continue on the work. I could use the weekend as a cure time, but when that contractor's pouring on Mondays and Tuesdays, TxDOT won't let them get on that contract for a minimum of 72 hours.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilmember Jennings.
A follow-up question on Broadway. You talked about the utilities and the sewers. Did we finally get our lift station problem completed? Is that out of the way now?
Yes, we do have a signed agreement with the apartment entity. My understanding is they were going to start as soon as, I think, last week, and I don't know what the holdup was, but they have a contractor, and he's supposed to be in there any day now to do the repairs.
That's not a problem
It's
anymore.
pretty much a done deal.
Okay, that's all I had.
I have one question regarding Carson Street. When we get everything ready and traffic is ready to go, are we going to have any kind of ribbon cutting or something to celebrate the end of the long, drawn-out process? Or are we just going to let it? We're just going to let it happen and. I wondered if
It's really whatever the pleasure of the council is. How do y'all feel?
I'd like to request that all staff go down there and get eggs thrown at them.
I think what all the citizens have put up with, I think we need some kind of ribbon cutting.
What I was thinking is even for the citizens, the businesses along there, to heighten the awareness of those businesses that have been putting up with this for
That's right.
Longer than I know. That may be appropriate, but again, it's up to this body to determine what they want to do.
obviously, from my comment, I agree with Councilmember Markham. I know it's symbolic, but it's symbolic of a great victory that we finally achieved, even though it took twice as long as we thought it was going to get there. We finally have got there, and that's a reason to celebrate.
Got two ribbons.
We will prepare something
Okay.
and advise you of what we come up with. Chamber two?
Anything else on item number 15? Thank you, Mr. Muir. We move now to item number 16, resignations of board members. Councilmember Hurley, I believe you have a resignation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I've got a resignation from Debbie Giltmeyer from the Beautification Board for family and economic reasons. She's having to reduce her volunteer service time.
Okay, we have Councilmember Hurley's resignation of Ms. Geltmeyer from the Beautification Board. If you will, register your vote to ratify that resignation. And that passes by unanimous vote. And I believe you have an appointment, Mr. Hurley, or Councilmember Hurley.
To fill Debbie Giltmeyer's place, I've got a Mr. Don R. Weldon, W-E-L-D-O-N. He's 42, and he's a citizen of Haltom City and a registered voter. And I've spoken with him, and he's very interested in serving on the Beautification Board, and I think he'll be an asset.
If you will, register your intent regarding ratification. And that passes by unanimous vote. And I have a reappointment to make to the Civil Service Commission, Mr. Don Bybee. I'm requesting ratification on that one, please. And that passes by unanimous vote. That having been addressed, there are no attendance requirements under item number 18. The council will move at this time into closed session pursuant to section 551.071, .072, .074. Council is back in session at 12 minutes till 12. We have action to take on a couple of items discussed in executive session. Councilmember Jennings, I believe you have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion that we instruct the city attorney to start condemnation proceedings on the property as discussed in executive session.
Do I have a second? Councilmember Markham?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. If you'll raise your hand if you're in favor of that, and that carries by unanimous vote. We have another item under section .074 to take action on. Councilmember Williams, you have a motion?
Yes, sir. After doing the annual review of the city's manager, I'd like to make a motion that we do a salary increase of 4.5% and move his evaluation date up to October. This coming October, where everyone will be evaluated at the same time.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Those in favor of the motion, raise your hand, and that carries by unanimous vote. There being no further business to be brought before the council at this time, we stand adjourned.